life in a noble manner. The early Middle Ages were characterized by a system based on a natural economy, where household self-sufficiency played a leading role. However, as trade developed and connections with the European market grew, the nobility transformed their estates into manors and large noble farms. The nobility derived income from agriculture, leasing land, and granting rights to exploit forests, mills, or taverns. Manors were the management centers for large land areas owned by the nobility or the church. Such farms began to develop, particularly in the 16th century, when the increasing demand for grain in Europe encouraged agricultural production. A typical manor consisted of arable land dominated by monocultures such as grain. The manor also included meadows, pastures, forests, and fish ponds. The manorial complex also included various buildings: the noble manor, the owner's residence, farm buildings such as barns, granaries, stables, and cowsheds, as well as residential buildings for the peasants and craftsmen working there. Workshops and mills were also crucial elements. The main building in the manor was often richly decorated and surrounded by a garden. The architecture of such buildings varied depending on the region, era, and wealth of the owner. Inside were living quarters, representative halls, and sometimes libraries and chapels. Another agricultural building was the granary, used for storing grain, agricultural products, and valuable items. Peasants worked in noble manners. Their work was based on the system of serfdom. Serfdom was a form of feudal compulsory labor that peasants had to perform for the landowner. Peasants were obliged to work in the manor fields for a specified number of days per week, often 2 or 3 days. Peasant dwellings were usually simple and modest, and their daily lives were closely tied to work in the fields and obligations to the feudal lords. Peasants mainly lived in wooden cottages, often in 1 or 2 rooms. These buildings were thatched and had sparse furnishings. The central feature of the cottage was the stove, used for heating and cooking. Primitive oil lamps or resin torches provided lighting. In one room, living space often merged with the area for livestock, which was particularly common in colder regions where animals' proximity helped heat the room. Wealthier peasant households could have separate buildings for keeping animals and additional storage for grain or tools. Peasants were mainly engaged in land cultivation, animal husbandry, and household chores. The main crops were grains, which formed the basis of the peasant diet, as well as legumes, vegetables, and fruits. Animals such as cows, pigs, sheep, horses, and poultry were also raised, providing meat, milk, wool, and draft power. In addition to serfdom and working in the manor fields, peasants were obliged to give a portion of their crops and perform various additional tasks, such as repairing roads and building and maintaining agricultural buildings on the estate. Peasants could also be required to provide special services, such as supplying products for the manor's needs or assisting in hunting. Although peasants' living conditions were difficult and their social status low, they constituted an extremely important part of feudal society, forming the basis of the agricultural economy and food production.
Thank you for being a part of our educational adventure. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos.